This is Brent Rains again for Alternate Perceptions. I last spoke with Donald Johnson. I knew years ago, back when I think we were both teenagers, and
Yep.
he lived in Connecticut, and I lived in the state of Maine, and he had a magazine called Flying Saucer Observer, and if I don't know if the lighting's all that good, but I still have several copies from way back then. I think I sent you some digital copies because I think you said you didn't have those anymore. But
I lost, yeah, but that's great. I do have the digital copies you sent me. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a lot of, that was back in 1969 and 1970. Then you moved on to go to college out in Colorado. And in 1971, you met Donald Saunders. David Saunders.
Yep.
I'm not completely awake yet. And here is a copy of the book that he wrote along with R. Roger Harkins. He was a member of the David Saunders was of the Condon Committee back in the late 1960s that was supposed to evaluate all the Air Force data on UFOs and determined there wasn't sufficient evidence, to declare that there was a threat to national security, which now there is talk of, and that there was anything to the UFO thing. Not enough data to establish a reality to it. Just misidentification of Venus on the horizon and so on. But David Saunders disagreed, said it was, really not, they weren't really doing the job they were supposed to be doing, essentially.
Well, he got fired.
Okay, he got fired.
Yeah.
That's an
he and one other investigator got fired. And Condon tried to ruin his career, which he was already a full professor. He was a co-principal investigator on it. So there's a lot of history there.
Right.
I was actually the person in 1975 that told him that Saunders had died that day, because we were working together in Boulder, and that was when he passed away. So yeah, Condon. Yeah.
Okay, and then you've been continuing work that he started on the UFOCAT, the data gathering, computer generated statistical analysis and all. You still doing that to this day, which you recently provided me and others with a breakdown on some of your latest data. And so we'll go ahead and use that in, put it on the same page with this interview. And just to recap, you're a counseling psychologist, an organizational consultant, and I guess now going on over 37 years, a test developer.
Mm-hmm.
And you're living and teaching in Thailand since 2003.
That's right.
Halfway around the world, 12 hours from where I am.
Yeah.
So
halfway
anyway,
around the world. Yeah. So I moved here in 2003. I've had a couple of jobs. Since 2017, I've been working at Assumption University. It's the first private international university in Thailand. It started in 1969, I think. And we have a graduate program in counseling psychology for master's and Ph.D. students. Yeah. And so I've been sending out since January, I've been working on the UFOCAT books by Albert Rosales, and I've added over 1,000 cases to from his files, from his books. Here's a copy of the one I'm working on right now. It's the 75 to 79 years, and I haven't gotten into that one yet, but I just finished the previous book. So so basically what I was doing was comparing the earlier years from 1960 to 1974 to the later years from 1980 to 2015, and finding some differences. But overall, the consistency is pretty remarkable over the, in terms of, there's basically if you know, in addition to just taking the type categories he has, I've been classifying them in terms of the humanoid type, and what, you know, there's many types, but there's 5 common groups. You know, you can sort of put them into 5 categories: the grays, the dwarves, but you know, kind of human looking but dwarf like, the humans, in other words, or pseudo humans, and the talls. These are people that are over 2 meters tall to 3 meters tall, and then the Nordics. And the Nordics are distinguished by being usually tall but blonde and blue-eyed. And then there's, of course, lots of other groups like the winged Mothman types, and goblins, and you know, the odds and ends, the odd characters. But those 5 groups are pretty consistent. I don't think there's been a year that there weren't some representatives for those 5 groups.
Right. I noticed you made reference to bedroom visitations with a lot of the cases, and a lot of those were grays, but other types too.
Yeah, about 40% were grays. There was a nice curve of what do you kind of, Jesus, I teach that stuff. What do you call that kind of a curve? It's a bell curve. Yeah, okay. There was a nice bell curve of peaking in the mid 1990s. So I think something like 30 odd reports in 1994, 1995. And then, well, the data, there's too much data to keep up with it all these days. So I'm just waiting, but I think we can talk up until about the year 2015 or so. So yeah, what I got was that in terms of types, there are fewer of the humans and more of the talls, more of the grays. But the other groups were virtually the same, represented percentage-wise.
Yeah. I know there's people in ufology in the field that have tried to break them down. This group comes from Orion, this group from Sirius, and so on. And one group will say there's 49 different ET races visiting us. Another one maybe 300 and something. You know, and of course some of them go by the fact that they claim they were from such and such, and there's just so many different. I think John Keel's conclusion was they lie.
Yeah.
Just straight out. You know, and it kind of struck me when you mentioned bedroom visitations, because he, back, I think in his 1970 book, Strange Creatures from Time and Space, he had a chapter that was called Bedroom Visitors. And I remember part of that was in an earlier men's magazine. He wrote an article about bedroom visitors, and it was quite intriguing to me. Of course, as a teenager, I had to hide my magazine because my mother would have found it and been very upset with me for reading such a magazine. But that's where it appeared. You know?
I think Hynek published in Playboy back in those days. So.
Yes, actually, Keel was trying to get that. You know, he went to the Pentagon and did an interview with someone there for 2 hours, and he was hoping to convince Playboy that he should get the piece, but he got beat out by Hynek. So, but anyway, so with all this data now, as I mentioned to you a while ago, and I sent you an interview I recently did, a YouTube interview with Barbara Fisher, who lives in Athens, Ohio, which is just very close to Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And she does the 6 Degrees of John Keel interviews. And she and a friend of hers who works, you know, in science and with computer technology, they're working with Albert Rosales to try to create for the public all this kind of data, download it to a computer where people can actually go in and interact and like check and see if Keel was right that most UFOs are seen on Wednesdays, and whatever you want to look for, would be there at your fingertips. And I don't know if you had any contact with them, but I'm thinking the two of you need to get together.
I started listening to the interview, but it's over an hour long. So right now I'm kind of pressed for time. So I couldn't listen to the whole thing, but yes. Yeah, frankly, a lot of those bedroom visitations are very scary. Eddie Bullard did his thesis back in the mid 1980s. I think when we first heard about it, it was 86 or 87. And I'm constantly impressed with the job that he did. He really did a thorough job on abductions, and particularly the bedroom visitations. And like doorway amnesia. People don't remember how they got into the UFO. That's pretty common. And the UFOs coming through the wall. Entities coming through the wall, but preferring to come through a window. And it didn't have to be open. The window could be glass, but they would they can pass through glass, and they would prefer that. And in fact, I had one abductee in New Jersey who said that they asked him to take the bric-a-brac he had in the window out of the window. So that's I think there's a lot to dig in there to suggest that the consistency of the so-called folklore is such that we can paste together the most common scenario for a bedroom visitation, and then an abduction experience. And Eddie did a very good job of putting that all together in the 1980s. And it's still going on today. Not as much, at least not as reported as much, but it's still going on. I'm confident that at least in the last 10 years, there have been abduction cases.
Yeah, I remember an abductee here in Tennessee. Am I coming through all right here? Anyway.
You're fine with me.
Okay. You hear me now? All right. Well, I wasn't sure. It's a new setup I got. So anyway, I want to make sure I'm coming through on the audio. An abductee here in Tennessee was telling me that he was taken through the window, and and the window would be closed. And each time he said he would kind of make a face like, oh no, here he goes. I'm going to smash into the glass or the door, the window frame, and he'd pass through just fine. And he was just always like, even though it had happened before, he would always like be preparing psychologically for the impact that didn't come.
Yeah.
But yeah, this whole UFO contact thing seems to go back, or close encounters with entities, humanoids, whatever kind of appearance. Some are light beings. Some even seem to like shapeshift from a ball of light into a humanoid form in the presence of the experiencer. And then you have, you go back to the Bible, Ezekiel's wheel within a wheel, and other cultures that seem to describe very similar things going back centuries. It's just the frame of reference, perhaps more spiritual back then. Now we're in, the age of technology, and does it conform to our expectations to some degree? Present itself in appearance where it appears to be, more of what we expect of extraterrestrial visitors to appear. Or have they always been extraterrestrial visitors? Or are they, as Keel said, ultra-terrestrial, something that's a part of the environment, but a different part of the electromagnetic spectrum or whatever? It's very, very, I've been involved in it 56 years myself. I know you've been longer, since 66. So, I remember Jacques Vallée making a comment about that I read online. I hadn't talked with him about this directly, but it was, you can become like yourself, a Ph.D. in psychology and such, and you have it all, worked out. Ufology is a field where you're just guessing, and it's you're just trying to uh, grapple with it and come up with some understanding. I remember Brad Steiger saying that he worked through about a dozen different theories. Each one he thought, this is the one I've been looking for, and then another piece of evidence would come along and it would demolish the theory, so we'd go on to another one and another one. So so many different theories, floating around, possibilities, ideas, concepts. But
well, let me there are some findings that we can point to. The other thing I was looking at was region of world, and I've basically categorized them by continent and then dividing certain, like Canada separate from the United States, and Mexico got thrown in with Central America different from South America, and so on. And there is a finding there that among humanoid reports, there are fewer in North America, and there are more in other parts of the world, particularly Europe, including Russia, including the Eastern Europe, what we used to call the Iron Curtain areas. More in Europe, more in South America, Central America, but fewer in North America. And I think there's a reason for that. I think our detection radar and other surveillance devices that we have in North America, the United States military have, make it more risky for them to appear as regularly as they used to. So that's one finding I can grasp onto, and saying that comparing the 60s and 70s to the 80s and later, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, there are fewer North American reports of humanoids, but there are more in other areas of the world. So.
Okay, yeah, that kind of reminds me of Keel making an observation when he was in West Virginia investigating reports that it's the mountain state, and a lot of the craft were seen low level, and it was a perfect place to for someone to conduct aerial activity, and not be detected on radar and such, surveillance. But that's an interesting observation. Yeah.
Well, the other connection is with water. And I've been a proponent of this for many years, that they use, there's a statistical correlation between those areas that are close to lakes, the shorelines, and major rivers, doing a county by county comparison, that they're more in areas that are adjacent to lakes, rivers, and shoreline. And the reason, I think, is they use water for hiding. It's a convenient hiding place. Or underwater bases. I believe there are underwater bases. I believe there are underground bases. And that's another thing we can talk about is UFO hotspots. I recall you had told me that you knew a ufologist in North Carolina, and you weren't sure. But I'm sure, looking at the data now, that yes, where she lives is a UFO hotspot. I think it was Pilot Mountain area of North Carolina. Yeah, that's definitely a UFO hotspot. And there's another one. Duluth, Minnesota is up there in St. Louis County, Hibbing, Minnesota, where Bob Dylan comes from. That's another big UFO hotspot. And of course, Colorado and New Mexico and Utah, they have several UFO hotspots in them. The San Luis River, the San Luis Valley is a number one. That's the number one UFO hotspot in the United States and the world. New Mexico has several. Of course, we've got Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, Uintah Valley area. So there are lots of UFO hotspots, and I think it's still connected to what Dave Saunders and Amy Michelle investigated, orthotony, straight lines, because there's 3 different lines intersect in St. Louis County in Minnesota, where Hibbing and Duluth are. And there's another line that Dave once told me about in the early 1970s that runs from Berkeley, Monterey, that is Monterey Bay, to Baltimore. Mobile, he calls it. So remember, there's a guy that wrote a book about the 37th parallel. Well, it's not the 37th parallel, but it's a great circle line that goes from the West Coast near Monterey to Baltimore. And every time I add more reports from the National UFO Reporting Center, I find Baltimore County, I find Monterey, I find everywhere in between. So they're still using these great circle routes. So if you live close to that line, where my brother lives now, my mother's farm is in southwestern Missouri. It's pretty close. It passes through there. Passes through central and south, El Paso County in Colorado, which is Colorado Springs area.
Yeah.
Big UFO hotspot.
Yeah. And of course, good old Sedona, Arizona. And
yep, Sedona's a hotspot.
Yeah. I think Chris O'Brien moved there after he'd been to in the San Luis Valley for so long. He likes to hang around them hot spots. And of course, Tom Dongo lives quite close to Sedona and has written several books on that activity. It's of course, you could, wherever you live, there can be always the chance of something happening. I live in a location here in Tennessee that very seldom do people have sightings, but every once in a while, because they find out about my interest, somebody will quietly tell me about seeing something quite unusual. And as usual, I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I'm usually there eventually. We had quite a series of sightings back in 72 and 73 over here in Giles County area of Tennessee and in south central Tennessee. Bigfoot, UFOs, landings. But I don't know, there were people claiming, and there was a guy who was writing the stories in a local paper about these the humanoids called the Plantos. And it's the only place in the world where the Plantos showed up, so I'm not sure. But there were credible sightings, and then there were some that were just incredible. I don't know what to believe,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I investigated some of the Bigfoot stories here in Tennessee and elsewhere, where there were reports also of balls of light here in Flintville, Tennessee, back around 76. Whenever the creature would appear, this one guy told me these balls of light would appear over the treetops nearby.
Mm-hmm.
So I always thought that was quite intriguing. And one guy in New Jersey told me about he had seen Bigfoot, and one time one was right behind him, following him down as he was walking at night, returning home along a country road, and he turned around face to face with a Bigfoot, he said, and there was a small ball of light behind the creature's shoulder that was making a kind of a high frequency sound. And for several seconds, just he and the creature were staring at each other. They appeared to be immobilized, both of them. And then as soon as the light went out and the sound, he turned around, continued on home at a faster pace, I think, and the creature turned around and went the opposite direction. So I know a couple in Florida who were investigating Bigfoot, and they told me there's no connection with UFOs. This is a separate phenomenon.
No, it's not.
I
can guarantee you it's not. It is there. I mean,
they saw the creature at this ranch that had all this activity, and then one night the husband was out walking in the driveway, and one of these craft with large windows flew over his head, and she saw an object on a nearby road that came down in front of her car and landed and then took off. It was like a ball of light. So they evolved to their understanding too.
Yeah. I recall back in the 70s when I was talking to Ron Westrom from Michigan. I think he's on Eastern Michigan, and he had a case from Pennsylvania where the UFO landed and the Bigfoot got out of the UFO, literally. So I mean, there are dozens of those reports, and there are dozens of reports where the hairy pongud, if it's a Bigfoot, I don't know, but it's certainly big, tall, and hairy, and they're associated with vanishings. The lights will show up and the creature will just vanish, disappear, kind of like the skinwalkers, type phenomena. So yeah, no, it's in fact, I don't even know if there is a North American ape that is not part of this phenomena. I challenge you to those people that are Bigfoot hunters. I think they're kind of out of luck because the phenomena will only let you see it when it wants to, basically.
Right. By the way, since you were also with MUFON, I think maybe as a state director in New Jersey some years back.
I was, and then Washington State too before that.
Yeah, I wondered if when you were in New Jersey, if you had any dealings with Peter Jordan.
No, doesn't ring a bell.
Oh, okay. Well, I've just done about 6 YouTube interviews with him, and we've had a lot of private conversations. He's been involved with a lot of things: the Howard Menger case, the cattle mutilations, the mystery light of Long Valley in New Jersey, which they explained is related to the composition of elements in the ground and seismic activity, and they photographed it. And anyway, there was a group called Stygia that he was involved with that was investigating. That was a natural phenomenon, but it was quite spectacular. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. Okay. Albert Rosales, I know a few years back when I did an interview with him, and I asked him how many cases of humanoids from around the world have you collected, and he said at that time it was like 17,000. That's a lot, and it's bound to be more. In fact, I get him to submit at least one article a month to my online magazine, Alternate Perceptions, to highlight all the different varieties. He just wrote an article for us that the reports of ugliest aliens. So,
well, we must give credit where credit is due. I mean, he's an amazing researcher. He's far surpassed any of the work that I've done. I don't know how many books he has, but there's got to be at least 20 of them. But I will say that in 1977, I got the ball rolling because I sent him. Dave Webb gave me HumCat in a 3-ring binder that was about this thick, and it was Ted Blocher and David F. Webb put together HumCat. And I stood at a Xerox machine and photocopied that thing for days and days, and I sent it off to him. So yeah, that I mean, I can't. Like the other thing I mentioned in my update on humanoid reports is that every time I look at another book of his, some 50% to 70% of the cases are new. That were not in UFOCAT before, that were not in HumCat. So and that's not uncommon. If any UFO book that you take and you enter the data into it. A few years ago, there was one about landings in Philip Mantle wrote one. I think it was landings in UK, and about 2/3 of them were new. And I thought for sure I'd have it covered very well, but no. There's just tons and tons of data out there, and just we're not keeping up with it. I don't know if anybody is. I don't know if the government is. Certainly there's more going on with government research than we know, but I don't think they're able to keep up with it either. So
Yeah, it's got to be a massive task, just from what I have seen. And Robert Rosales has a Facebook page a lot of people go to, Humanoids, UFOs, and Other Strange Phenomena. And just every day he pours stories in there and gets reader comments. And then some people share stories that I guess he's probably never heard, from wherever they are. So it's an ongoing, very, very much an ongoing process. And you never get to the bottom of the barrel. But anyway, and so after all of this, have you any personal conclusions or theories you kind of fixate on that you think that's your pet theory or whatever for all of this?
pet theory. Well, yeah, there's a lot of UFO reports. There's a lot of humanoid types. So are abductions real? Yeah, I decided in the 1990s that they were physically real. There may be out of body experiences associated with them. I'm not discounting that, but probably at least the first encounter that people have is a real physical event. They are physically taken from the automobile or taken from the and so I don't have I think we have competing hypotheses that are quite viable. That there's not one explanation for the phenomenon that accounts for all of the data, but I think probably they are among us. In other words, I do believe that there are underground bases. I think there are underwater bases. I think that one of the best evidence for that is they are concerned about what we do to the planet, and particularly nuclear. So they don't like nuclear weapons, and they're trying to get us not to use them or get rid of them. And as Dave Saunders once told me, if you were just extraterrestrials, why would you care? But they're living here too. They have established themselves here, and they don't want us to destroy. And now they've been talking about climate change since before it was fashionable, back in the 50s and 60s. So, and the other thing that happens is that when experiencers have close encounter experiences, their lifestyle changes, their outlook towards the world changes. They become more of an environmentalist. They become more, they change their lifestyle.
Yeah, it's kind of like with experiences some have compared. They're the changes that they become more, environmentally concerned, and also they seem to develop sort of intuition or psychic ability. Some of them,
Yes.
So,
well, I don't know what you know about Uri Geller. I don't know how to classify him as a charlatan, but he has passed a number of tests, and his experiences basically began with UFO abduction experiences. So
yeah, I was interested to find out that Jacques Vallée was actually called into the study of remote viewers out in California early on, SRI, and even a group before that, because of the fact that they were finding not only Uri Geller but others who claimed that UFOs were real and they'd had experiences with them, and it seemed like there were a lot of remote viewers they were working with who also had UFO backgrounds. Ingo Swann too,
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, I met him in New York. He passed away a few years ago, right? Recently. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's another fellow. Warrant officer, U.S. Army warrant officer, Irish name. I can't remember right offhand, but he's another one of the remote viewers that became a UFO investigator as well because of his experiences. Yeah. So yeah, Ingo Swann, Uri Geller. Saunders was involved with the SRI study too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
what's next in your work in all of this? Are there any new directions, or are you doing any other like talks or presentations, or are you writing a book?
I'm going to update the user's guide for UFOCAT, and I will release a new version, which has, I think, 209,000 cases in it now, 209,000 primary entries. So that's my announcement, is that there'll be a new version of UFOCAT for sale. You should be able to get it through the Center for UFO Studies. And I will try to get the user's guide updated as well, because the last update was 2002. And it's tripled in size since then.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm basically trying to get caught up on Bigfoot. You know, I've got two new Bigfoot books, new to me at least. You know, Appalachian Bigfoot and the Oregon Bigfoot Highway. So I'm trying to get caught up on Bigfoot. I'm trying to get caught up on Florida. And I got a bunch of Preston Dennett books here to enter. All four volumes of Not From Here, and UFOs and Nukes by Hastings. So those are on my wish list of things to get into UFOCAT.
All right. The Bigfoot one, I'll recommend Joshua Cutchin and Tim Renner's book, Where the Footprints In, Volume 1. I heard them.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll write it all down and send it to you in an email. But that book is filled with all kinds of Bigfoot accounts that they've collected, and they involve the UFO paranormal type elements too. You know, so it's and they cite the sources, and it's a great book to have on Bigfoot. You know, it's not for the people who think Bigfoot is just, you know, the missing link, anthropological missing link out there. There's a lot more to it. So,
well, you know, I went to the first Man-like Monsters on Trial conference in 1977 in UBC, University of British Columbia, way back then. And you know, there was one faction of the Bigfoot hunters that were trying to shoot one to get a body and to collect a skeleton. But you know, basically, I'm more impressed by the paranormal aspects of the phenomena than I am by the other studies which suggest that there's a North American ape. You know, so
yeah, and I visited Stan Gordon, who back in the 72, 73 had, I guess, several hundred Bigfoot cases, and some of them involved the UFO. One Bigfoot creature was even reported carrying a globe of light in its hands. You know,
yeah.
There's just some very interesting reports. But so anyway, well, I guess with one thing I'll add, the Center for UFO Studies now is, of course, Hynek has passed on, and I guess the head man there is now Mark Rodinger. And so he'll have, I don't think that CUFOS now currently does any active investigation. It's mostly archival, and maybe still publishing some, but
I'll let you know. I'm headed to Kalamazoo in May, and there'll be a gathering of the Kalamazoo crowd at Mike Swords' place, and there's about 20 people that come that are connected, and I'll let you know what comes of that. I think it's the third weekend in May.
All right.
And I have a daughter that lives in Kalamazoo, so that's two reasons to head off there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, safe journeys, and you know, take care.
Yeah, you too.
And anyway, if anybody, would you like to give any contact information? If anybody would like to get in touch with you and
Sure.
discuss any data or theories or anything?
I'm more than happy, because I'm happy to talk to people. I've got I've just finished a semester. They're on a weird, wacky schedule over here in Thailand. April and May are our summer months, so I'm able to take some time off. And so yeah, people can get in touch with me at my my full name, Donald Arthur Johnson at gmail.com, which is the one I use for UFOs, or my work email, jdonald@au.edu. And I also have a line account, so people can find me online. So Donald Johnson, basically. Yeah, and I'm staying active. I'm staying up to date with the humanoid stuff. I'm basically just crunching numbers, doing statistical analyses, and that's what I'm good at. So that's what I'll keep doing. I haven't done any investigations, one, in the 20 years I've been here in Thailand. I just don't get access to the local grapevine because I have a Thai wife, which I don't have an ear to so for Southeast Asian reports, I'm sorry, I'm not a good source. But anybody wants to get in touch, I'd be happy to at least send them an email response. Okay.
All right. Well, Donald,
okay.
Thank you very much, and for taking this time to share what you've been working on and all your thoughts on all this. And anyway, take care. We'll stay in touch.
We will.
And
okay.
All right.
All right. Well, good night. It's 10:30 here in Bangkok. So
yeah, and 10:30 a.m. here, and it's night there. So we're just exactly 12 hours apart. All right. Good talking with you again. Always good to talk with you. So take care.
Good night. Bye-bye.